Let's talk about Hollywood actor Frank Grillo, who's clocking in at 60 years. He recently did an interview with Men's Health, and after that interview, this beautiful picture of him went viral on social media. People were very quick to say that this physique is absolutely impossible to achieve in your 60s or in your 50s or around 60. So let's take a look on whether this is actually possible naturally. Because, of course, the discussion that came up right away was, is he natty or not? Is it naturally possible to have a physique like this? So we're also going to talk about this. But first, let's take a look at whether or not it's possible to do this naturally. And for that, I want to take a look at Frank's history. If we look at his progression over the years, that's all of the pictures I could find that I could actually allocate to a certain time period. We can see that this is what he looked like at age 25. So he was in phenomenal shape, but for somebody who already back then, according to what he says, was training every single day, this is a very realistic physique. He doesn't look like somebody who's on an insane amount of steroids, who is a bodybuilder. He just looks like a guy who is in very good shape. Of course, you have to take into account that this is all perfect lighting for a swimwear photo shoot. So this is probably not what he looked like in real life. This is what he looked like at the end of a couple of days water fast for this photo shoot. Now, this physique, in my opinion, is absolutely achievable for someone who's 25, assuming he packed on a bit more muscles over the next few years. And then all he had to do was maintain it. These are all pictures from him around the age of 50. So while he looks like he got bigger here, I believe that this is just different angle. Everybody who's ever done pictures of themselves trying to look good on camera will notice that, yeah, these abs look a lot bigger than these, but this is just pretty much lighting, right? The light is the shadows here, the shades are a bit different. So it looks like his abs are bigger, but it's actually pretty much the same body. This is almost the same as here, so there's no big difference. So pretty much the only difference between 25 and 50 is that he aged and he was able to maintain his physique. And when I say only difference and all he had to do was maintain, keep in mind that if you want to maintain a body like this, will still require a lot of dedication, a lot of consistency, having your diet on point and training consistently. Now, I have been following Frank Grillo since the year 2021 on social media, and he constantly posts his workouts and his diet. So it's quite believable that he's still extremely consistent. He literally posts pictures of himself training almost every day, at least through certain episodes. He's crazy consistent. He's also just in love with the training, in love with boxing. That's why he trains so much. Now, another reason why I believe his transformation is so realistic is my own transformation. This was what I looked like just before my 37th birthday. I had been training consistently for a few years and I was in okay shape, even if I didn't look like it. I was strong. I built some muscle, which you can see here. But that was the point where I decided that it was time to actually look like I was going to the gym. So I decided to cut. This is a bit over a year later, probably my most shredded pic that I have. And you can see that, yeah, I do look like I'm in much better shape. But all it is really, I dropped 10 kilograms of body fat and I have pretty good lighting here. So you can see also the impact of just being lean and having good lighting. And this is me at 38. And if I can look like this, somebody who just trains because I like to look good, but I only hit the gym, really lift weights maybe 3 days a week. If I can look like this as somebody who has a career and works 60 hours a week at a desk, then somebody who's has a big part of his life is being in shape and looking good for movies. Of course, if he trains every day, he's going to look like this. However, the point where it gets a bit unrealistic is when we move into his 50s. So we've seen this picture that went viral, and most people probably know this picture from the scene in the movie Boss Level. Now, the Boss Level movie came out in 2021, but it was actually recorded, according to what I could find, in 2018. So he was 53 here. And this picture that went viral from the Men's Health interview seemed to pinpoint his age, or it implies That's the same picture that he's 60 years old here. But I was actually able to find a post on Instagram with this same picture, and it's a post from 2020. So this would put him somewhere around the age of 55. But I've then been able to see a transformation video showing Frank Grillo's transformation that was already from 2020 and showing this picture. So that means that this picture is actually older than 2020. So let's assume that it's from before that time here, because what we also know is that Frank did Anavar in preparation of this movie. He talked about this in the interview. So I would say this type of physique, this progression going from here when you're 50 to here when you're 53 is not realistic without performance enhancing drugs. Making such a big leap in your 50s. And I'm going to talk about why that is in a moment. Now, we don't really know what he looks like right now, but what we do know is that there are a bunch of other celebrities that are pretty much around 60 years old that are in phenomenal shape. Now, I picked Gianluca Vacchi because he looks, I believe, for somebody who's almost 60, who just enjoys training, he looks phenomenal. And we have here Lenny Kravitz, who's also in great shape at the age of 61. Now, assuming that he had stayed completely natural and just continued training, I believe he could have maintained this physique until he's 60 without using any performance enhancing drugs, just by continuing training and dieting properly. Now, let's talk about what you actually need to maintain that physique. If you're here at the age of 50 and you want to make sure that you still look like that at the age of 60, what do you have to do? Well, you need to do two things. You need to maintain your muscle mass and you need to maintain low body fat. But for some reason, older people often struggle with both of these. One of the reasons that's often brought up is the decline in metabolism. So people think, well, if I age, it's harder for me to maintain my body fat percentage because my body is not as good as at metabolizing my food intake. But we do know from recent studies that the metabolism doesn't really start declining until your 60s. So the decline in metabolism is not really an issue. What could be an issue is the decline in testosterone, growth hormone, and insulin sensitivity that starts for many people already even before their 50s. Now, I had ChatGPT summarize what the impact of these three factors are. Lower testosterone leads to less stimulation of muscle protein synthesis, reduced muscle mass and strength, and more fat storage, amongst other things. Lower growth hormone, IGF-1, reduced tissue repair, weaker collagen synthesis. Sorry, my English is horrible here. And a lower ability to build or maintain lean mass. And lower insulin sensitivity is harder for muscles to absorb glucose and amino acids, easier to gain fat, higher risk of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. So to just summarize it, it's harder to keep your body fat low and it's harder to build muscle. And of course, if you use steroids, this is compensated and it gets easier again, and it might even get easier than when you were 25. Now, just to briefly make a difference here, when people talk about taking steroids, what they usually talk about is abusing steroids, taking steroids in an amount that is not physiologically normal. There is something called testosterone replacement therapy, and Frank Grillo has openly said that he has been doing that for about 10 years, which basically means a doctor did your blood, he had a look at your blood and determined that your testosterone levels were so low that you should add testosterone to make sure that you're within the normal range. And typically they boost it to the top of the normal range. And Frank did this. So his testosterone is right now, while he's 60, his testosterone is probably at the level of a 25-year-old, at the same level that it was at when he built this physique. So, of course, when you do that, it is going to be a lot easier to maintain that physique. But is it impossible to maintain a physique that you build if you're not doing testosterone replacement therapy or not doing steroids? And the answer to that is no. It is going to be a lot harder. it just gets more difficult when you're older. But if you maintain a clean diet, if you keep training extremely consistently, and if you maintain good sleep and low stress level, then at least in accordance with the most recent studies, in accordance with what science tells us, it should be possible to maintain that physique. That said, I do personally believe that you should always have your blood checked. And if you're deficient in nutrients or if your testosterone is low and your doctor tells you that you should compensate it, especially if you haven't been able to get your testosterone higher through dieting and training, then yes, it makes sense to use TRT and compensate your deficiency in testosterone. So, in summary, most men can maintain relatively low body fat and solid muscle into older age. The margin for error just shrinks. You will need more consistency and you will need more discipline, and you might need more time to recover, and you might have to be more careful with your diet, since the hormonal and metabolic buffer that your body usually had isn't as strong as it was in your 20s. So, is it possible to look like this if you built that physique when you were young? At least, let's say you build it before your body started decomposing, before you turned 50. If you enter your 50s with a physique like this, yes, it is possible. It's not going to be as easy as when you're doing steroids or when you're doing TRT, but it is absolutely possible. And I believe these two people are great examples for guys with phenomenal bodies. They don't look like bodybuilders, but they have great physiques for guys who are around 60. And I find it super inspiring when people look like this. It's my goal to have that sort of physique when I'm in my 60s. I'm just talking about the physique here, not about the fitness level, not about how good in shape they are. But if I can look like this at the age of 60, I would be extremely happy. That said, this picture of Frank Grillo for me will always be an inspiration to imagine this is my goal, to look like this at 60, even if it's slightly unrealistic after what we've just talked about. It's still my goal because I want my goal, my vision of my future self to be inspirational, slightly out of grasp. And I know I might never be able to achieve it, but it is something that I can aspire to be.